Hello, it's your favorite previous IELTS examiner, Mia Andrews. So today I want us to talk about the IELTS band descriptors. These are going to specifically be the IELTS band descriptors for speaking. There are two types of IELTS band descriptors. There are the speaking band descriptors and the writing band descriptors. But of course, today we are only talking about the speaking band descriptors. And more specifically, we are only going to be talking about the band descriptor for fluency and coherence. Now, fluency and coherence sounds pretty easy, right? It's how well you speak without repeating yourself or pausing or saying, and then staring off into the distance and looking at nothing. Okay, so this is very common to hear from the very beginning of the exam. So, from the very beginning of the exam from IELTS Speaking Part 1, we're listening to hear how well you speak, right? For the IELTS Speaking Part 1, we only really listen to get an idea as to where you are. So, when an examiner asks, "Can you tell me your full name, please?" and you pause and you go, Joe. And that's not your full name. That's only one name. We need at least two. And this is even more noticeable when it's a Chinese candidate who has chosen an English name and they give us their English name, but they don't give us their Chinese name. And they go, Joe. And then we have to say, "Can you give me your full name, please?" And then they give us their full Chinese name, hopefully. Okay? That's when we immediately know from the very beginning of the exam that there might be some fluency and coherence problems. Okay? So when we're going through the exam, and let's talk about Part 1, since we're already there, your answers need to be around 30 seconds. Now, if the examiner interrupts you, great, okay? But if the examiner is interrupting you because you go, I think graduating university would make me happy in the future, then we have more of evidence that the fluency and coherence isn't going to be very high. If you are someone who knows that you pause a lot when you're speaking, you go, or you say, I, or repeat words consistently, you are not going to get a 6 in fluency and coherence. You're going to get a 5. Okay? You're just not producing long turns. You're not speaking fluently, right? You're speaking with a lot of difficulty. And that's going to keep you from getting a 6 or above in IELTS speaking fluency and coherence. Okay? Now, with that said, for IELTS speaking part 2, they give you the option and they say, you can speak for 1 to 2 minutes. It's a lie, okay? You're going to speak for 2 minutes, whether you want to speak for 2 minutes or not. If you stop and we have to ask you a question and you have to keep speaking for a long time, that means you stopped way too soon. And that can affect your fluency and coherence score. Though most likely in IELTS Speaking Part 2, we're going to be listening for your pronunciation more than your fluency and coherence. It is something to keep in mind. You want the examiner interrupting you. And you want them interrupting you because you're just going and you're going smoothly. That kind of interruption is perfect. Okay? If you're getting interrupted again because you're repeating yourself a lot, you're making a lot of pauses, hesitations, those things are going to keep you from getting the higher score that you're looking for. Okay? What we really, really want for fluency and coherence is for you to talk for a long time, which takes us to IELTS Speaking part 3 for fluency and coherence. This, you're going to want to just keep going until the examiner stops you and asks you another question. Okay? If you feel like you can't keep going, but you produced a long turn, like you spoke for a good bit of time, maybe 30 to 45 seconds, and you say, oh, that's it, right? Then that's okay. That's still a long turn. And then we'll ask you another question. Give us another long turn. Okay? So that's the key to fluency and coherence, speaking for a long time without pausing a lot. Now, we have to take a minute. And I need to warn you. There are many candidates who I think they've listened to maybe a lot of American English and they say like a lot. And that's okay until you're saying it every single sentence. When it's every sentence, that's affecting your fluency and coherence. That's going to keep you from getting a higher score. Some other types of kind of fillers that I've heard that are similar to like are yeah, you know, obviously. That's a really interesting question. Let me think about it. That one bothers me the most because we have sometimes candidates who will use, oh, that's such an interesting question. Let me think about it for every single question in part 3. And at that point, we know that you don't know what to say. And that's going to also affect your fluency and coherence. You're using it all the time. It's not great. We know it's not an interesting question, okay? So just be very careful. I had a candidate once who was using that one I mentioned, obviously, quite a lot. And every sentence she would start with, well, obviously, going to university would make me happy. And obviously in this context, used like that sounds rude because obviously I don't know you. So none of these answers are obvious to me, right? Unless you've said it previously before, sometime in the exam, I have no idea. Okay? So we just need to be very careful with the words that we choose to constantly use to kind of fill space, or sometimes they just become like almost like ingrained in your brain and you just use it all the time over and over again. For example, that's exactly what happens with the word like in American English. So often, especially teenagers, they'll say, you know, like, I just really enjoy like going out to the mall and like going to the movies and like hanging out with my friends. This is problematic. It's going to keep you from getting that high fluency and coherence score that we want. We want you to be producing formal language, and like, you know, right, obviously, these things in this context aren't formal enough for the exam, and they're very limiting in what we can know about how you speak. And they interrupt your fluency when you are speaking. So they're not recommended for you to consistently be using. Once or twice, that's okay. But over and over and over again, every single sentence, that's a problem. And we have to fix that problem. Now, with that said, I have some ways that you can fix this problem. So you could always record yourself speaking. I know that this can be awkward and weird, and we don't like to listen to the sound of our own voice. Even me right now, I'm going to have to re-listen to this video, and I hate the sound of my own voice so much. Okay? But we have to do it. This is how we can check how we sound and if we're producing fluent speech. Okay? One way to make your speech more fluent and to increase your long turns of speaking with less pauses and hesitations I would really recommend you memorize or read a movie line, and then you listen to the movie, like the movie scene that you're remembering. You speak it and record it yourself. You listen to your recording versus the movie, right? And this will also really help you with your natural speech as well, which will help your pronunciation score. And as we should know, fluency and coherence goes hand in hand with pronunciation. If your fluency and coherence score is high, then your pronunciation score is likely, but not always, likely to also be very high. So these things complement each other. It's great to work on them together. This technique also works really well with audiobooks. So you can listen to the audiobook, you can record your own version of a paragraph that you hear in the audiobook, and then re-listen to the audiobook and compare the two, right? So hopefully this helps you in your efforts to getting the perfect IELTS score. All right, we'll be back probably within a few days with another IELTS band descriptor for speaking, obviously, to help you with that. I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.